Cracking YouTube's Ptcg. In today's video, we are going to be talking about the top 5 brand new cards from Mega Dream. Now, number 5 is going to be Spectrier. And we actually haven't gotten a Spectrier card in a while. I think the last one was printed was in Chilling Reign, which is going to be the card's debut as a VMAX. Very historically good card. But this Spectrier also has a couple of interesting applications to standard as well. So the first attack, whatever, not really too crazy. 30 damage for 1 Psychic. We have Screamtail as the same attack with Slap. But the really nice thing here is the second attack is going to be Phantom Beat for Psychic Colorless. Says you can discard all energy attached to this Pokemon, place 12 damage counters on one of your opponent's Pokemon. Now this is pretty big considering we still have Gardevoir EX in the format still, and this Pokemon is really cool because historically with a lot of the Guardi attackers, they're going to keep that energy attached to it, so sometimes your energy can get stuck on a single Pokemon. But with this Spectrier, you're going to discard all of that energy. Therefore, next turn, you can still use that energy to, attach and then do damage with the Monkey Dories. And obviously, this card pairs really well with Monkey Dory as well. By putting 3 energy on it, you're going to be putting 6 damage counters onto your Spectrier, which means you can put 18 damage counters on your opponent's board in a single turn, which means you can knock out things like Squawkabilly. You can knock out low HP, like Stage 1 Pokemon. We see, like, the new Charmeleon that has 110 HP. And this Pokemon is just really good to kind of break boards. The nice thing is you're putting 12 damage counters on your opponent's Pokemon, so it's not something like Screamtail that's going to be doing damage, so this gets through things like Shaman, which is really cool. So, I think this card will definitely find its home in Gardevoir. I think maybe down the line we could see this card included in Psychic Patch decks. It is kind of a lot of investment to, go attach and then probably double Psychic Patch to this as well. But you never know what the future holds for us. Maybe we'll see some more support for the pony, but I think this card is very good. Alright, so next up on the list, we have Rayquaza. Now, this is a basic Pokemon with 120 HP, so it's pretty beefy, but also has an attack for a Lightning and Colorless, Assault Break. Does 20 damage, plus, if this Pokemon is switched from the bench to the active spot during this turn, this attack does 90 more damage. Now, we'll still have Jet Energy, which is pretty solid, and there's a couple other cards that I think could make this card good as well, namely one being Crispin. So, now a deck like Joltik Box has an out to do 110 damage turn 1. So, this gives Joltik Box an additional win con, because traditionally with that deck can't attack turn 1. They're going to be using something like Joltik to power up something like an Iron Hands. But now this deck has the ability to donk you if you're playing something like Gardevoir, or Dragapult, or Grimmsnarl, that, historically turn 1 doesn't have the greatest track record of putting down a ton of basics turn 1 without the use of that supporter card. And this card is also just good in GLC, right? Being able to do 110 damage for 2 energy, very good in that format. Also, worst case scenario, if you are playing a deck that's going to be playing fire energy as well, you can do 130 damage for 3 energy. So I think, this might be honorable mention for GLC. I think it's going to be very good in that format. But in standards, it also does have a couple applications. We do have the Electros that has the ability to attach an energy from your discard pile to one of your benched Pokemon. And because this Pokemon attacks for Lightning Colorless and only has 1 retreat cost, we can maybe see, like, attack with 110 with the Rayquaza. Alright, retreat, attack with another Rayquaza. And you kind of have a cycle of just very efficient, low-energy attackers with a solid amount of HP. Who knows, maybe you could throw, like, a Bravery Charm on this, and then it's 170, so your other one-prizer decks are maybe going to have a hard time being able to attack into you. Obviously, this Pokemon attacks for 2 energy, so it's a little bit less efficient than something like the old Zapdos that we saw from Team Up that was, I think, 80 for 1 energy. So I think this card will definitely find a home in Joltik Box to be able to get that turn 1 attack off, to just kind of either, like, let's say your opening hand is like Nest Ball plus a Prime Catcher plus a Crispin, right? It's not crazy to open your A-Spec, right? We've all, played Guardy Open or Secret Box, played Joltik Box, or, Miraidon opened our Prime, so, it happens every once in a while. Maybe I'll go Rayquaza, Crispin, Prime Catcher, kill your only Ralts, and then you have to kind of spend another turn to set up your board, and then, alright, next turn, retreat, boss, knock out your Ralts again, so, it could be pretty rough for the Gardevoir players and, the little basic Pokemon decks like Dreepies, so, just being able to do that amount of damage for pretty much nothing is really nice. Also, if slap a Vitality Band on it, you don't even have to move it to do 30 damage. Joltik Box already plays Vit Band, so you can knock out, like, Badoos and stuff, too, which is pretty cool if, you just need to go, like, Crispin attached by Vitality Band, which could be cool. So, yeah, I think Rayquaza will definitely have a home in a couple of standard decks. I think just having A low energy attack that's efficient damage with no weakness is going to be pretty solid for this card. Now, speaking of Joltik Box, it's actually going to get another buff in this brand new set as well. So Light Ball is Pikachu's signature item in the video game, giving it a stat boost. So they mirrored something similar in this new Mega Dream set, where Pikachu is getting a tool called Light Ball. And Light Ball says the attack of Pikachu EX Pokemon tools attached to does 50 more damage to your opponent's active EX Pokemon. Now, this is really cool because now if you were able to power up a Pikachu using something like a Flareon or a Crispin, if you already had an attacker on the field, you can now do an extra 50 damage. Because they didn't think 300 damage was enough on a 2-prize Pokemon. Now we're doing 350. So if you can actually even buff this further with something used like Karate Belt or Kieran, so now Pikachu can knock out basically everything in the format, because we see something like Mega Dragonite EX coming in the next set with 370 HP. Now, I don't think that card is very good, but, you know, it does give Pikachu the option to pretty much knock out anything. The only downside is if you do attach a Light Ball to Pikachu, you can't attach Sparkling Crystal, so it's going to make it a little bit harder to power Pikachu EX, but maybe we can see those Terra Box decks or the Joltik Box decks include something like that Electros I was talking about in the last selection. So I think this is very good for Pikachu. Obviously, being able to do 350 kind of fixes your math into things like Gardevoir, Dragapult, which are like the two most played decks at the moment. And then for the new EX Pokemon as well, like the Mega Pokemon, we can see this kill something like a Bravery Charmed Kangaskhan or a Mega Lucario. So very solid inclusion for these Terra Box decks, these Joltik Box decks, and maybe we'll just see Pikachu decks now too, now that Pikachu can kind of just solo everything in the format. But I think, your perfect partner there is Iron Hands to be able to deal with the one-prizer deck, so I imagine it's just another Joltik Box buff. But yeah, I think Light Ball is a very good card, and we'll see it a lot in any deck that wants to play Pikachu EX. I think this is a great inclusion. For number 4, I'm going to be cheating a little bit. I'm going to be including 2 cards, the Snorunt and the Mega Frostlass EX. One, because the Snorunt has incredible stats, being a 70 HP basic Pokemon with an attack for 1 water energy and 1 retreat cost. The attack isn't really anything to write home about, but being able to do 10 damage, you can break stuff like that Pikachu EX we're talking about for number 3. And I think this card will find its home, namely in Grimmsnarl and then other decks that want to include the Mega Frostlass as well. I actually think we could see Mega Frostlass being played in the Grimmsnarl deck, just because it has a very good opening attack. So, if we look down here to Mega Frostlass EX, the attack for 1 water is Rebellion. Does 50 damage times the amount of cards in your opponent's hand. Now, this is pretty crazy, considering Iono is still in the format, right? And I guess we still have Judge if you want to include that as well, but Iono is namely going to be doing more damage. So, with the 50 damage multiplier, if your opponent has, you Iono your opponent, they have 6 cards in hand, this attack does 300 damage. Which is pretty ridiculous, right? If you're playing against something like Absol Kangaskhan, where all of their Pokemon have 300 or less HP and they're multi-prize Pokemon, you turn 2, slam this down, hit them for 300, especially because they're going to be drawing cards with Kangaskhan and adding, padding their hand with things like Arven or Town Store, just, getting a bunch of cards in their hand. This is going to do a lot of damage for 1 energy card, and it's going to be really hard for those decks to kind of one-shot you back. Also, the stats are very good as well. 310 HP, 1 retreat cost, all very solid. So you could definitely see this thing paired with something like Turo or the Wally just to be able to heal it and attach another energy. I think this card's going to be very difficult to kill because there's not a lot of good metal attackers in Standard at the moment. They're going to be able to one-shot this Pokemon. And so when you include something like this Mega Frostlass, it's something that's going to be doing a lot of early pressure onto your opponent. And if they ever have to commit a 2-prize Pokemon to pad their hand more, it's going to be really rough. So let's say you play against something like Dragapult, right? And, you knock out their Badoo. They're going to have, 3 or 4 cards in hand, going in the second turn. They're going to get some Dracloaks down. They're going to play Pheasantipity to pad their whole hand. And then it's like, okay, now the Dragapult player has 10 cards in hand. All right, Boss Fez, bang, hit it for 500 damage. And now you're up a bunch of prizes. And then even on the next turn, your opponent's going to have to commit like a Dusknoir plus an attack for Dragapult, and then if you do that, your Dusknoir takes a prize, then your opponent gets a card in their hand, and they're going to knock out Frostlass, and then you take 3 prize cards. So now your Frostlass is doing minimum 150 damage, plus the amount of cards that they had in the hand previous, even if they enter themselves down to like 3 or 4 cards, even like 2 cards, right? They get 2 cards in their hand, then boom, they're taking 3 prizes. Now they're at 5. So now you're doing 250. So if you can find a way to, bump your opponent's hand up a little bit there's a new Frostmoth in the new set that just says both players draw a card. Not really sure how much I like that card just because you are giving your opponent cards. But maybe if you made a dedicated just Frostlass EX deck, it couldn't be that bad, right? Just being able to, draw a bunch of cards with your Frostmoth. Sorry, there's a lot of Frost Pokemon. And then just being able to, continually apply this high amount of pressure because you really want your opponent to have a lot of cards in hand. So you don't really care if they have a ton in hand because, the more cards they have in hand, the more damage you're going to be doing. So I think that Frostlass is definitely going to be an interesting inclusion in Standard. Great stats, low energy cost, and a good basic. And there's going to be a lot of ways to support this card, I think, too. You can just throw in any random draw engine or just a late game attacker. Like, you can also include things like Blood Moon Ursaluna and also the Frostlass Monkey Dory deck that we currently have in Standard with that doesn't play Grimmsnarl. Also benefits from this being able to do a lot of early damage. So I think, yeah, this card is very, very good. And number 5, you all knew it was going to be this card. The best card in Mega Dream, N Zekrom. This card is exactly what N Zoroark needed to catapult itself to arguably the best deck in the format because it's going to fix those gaping holes that Zoroark was missing. And now, with this new addition, you have an out something like Cornerstone without having to include a tech spot into your deck. Also, the 250 damage point that this deck now has is a huge buff considering that Zoroark's weak point was that it had a low damage output compared to the other high tier, top tier decks in the format. Now, N Zoroark's selling point is that it definitively beats Gardevoir and it definitively beats Dragapult. And now that you have something that does 250 damage, you're better into those big basic decks that Zoroark tends to struggle with as well. Now, other decks that Zoroark can struggle with are going to be something like Ceruledge, but now that you have something that does 250 base damage, if you find a modifier, something like a Monkey Dory or a Binding Mochi, you can now hit that 280 damage number to be able to take those one prize knockouts. And now, this second attack, Rampaging Thunder, it says this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. It doesn't really matter in Zoroark. One, because you have a lot of switching cards. You have regular switch that is sometimes played in the deck. Most of the decks play 2 copies of Turo to be able to reset your Zoroark. And the big one is going to be that Petron EX to be able to just, switch into another Pokemon. And then you can kind of retreat out. You can use something like Yveltal or just another Air Balloon Zoroark. So it's a condition that doesn't really affect Zoroark. But yeah, this card is absolutely incredible, giving you an out into something like Crustle. Also giving you an out into something like Cornerstone Ogerpon is going to help Zoroark kind of round out the things that were making it not the best deck in the game. But now I think there could be an argument post this N Zekrom release that Zoroark could just be the best deck in the game. It seems to be one of those decks where really good players will gravitate towards playing this card and do very well with it. We can see it's been a regional winner this format, and Liam Halliburton, I believe his name is, also got second at Vegas with it while getting a regional win this season with it. So we can definitely see really good players doing well with the deck, just to be able to have a billion cards in hand and filter your deck out to kind of get whatever you need in that matchup, even while having like a medium to kind of low power, is going to be very effective in the hands of a good player. And now just with this card, I think Liam's just going to win 20 more regionals. So hey man, it must be Christmas for that guy over here. So good luck to Liam in these future events. We'll probably see him win Worlds with N Zoroark. So yeah, this is definitely the best card out of Mega Dream. So thank you guys for watching. If you liked videos like this, let me know in the comment section down below. I definitely like yapping about Pokemon cards. So if you made it to the end of the video, shoot me a follow. Go follow me on Twitter. Follow me on Twitter, Ptcg, same as the YouTube. So have a good rest of your day. Enjoy. Happy holidays.